Well, welcome to a meeting of the editorial board of the St. Augustine Record with candidates for the office of St. Augustine Beach City Commission, Seat 1. We're joined by Commissioner Andrea Samuels and Maggie Koska. Representing the Record is publisher Tony Barados, executive editor Craig Richardson, reporter Jared Keever, and opinion page editor Jim Sutton. This discussion is taking place in the afternoon of October 20th. So, ladies, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, taking some time out of your day to meet with us.
Well, thank you for doing this. This is great. It's a great community service. Thank you.
Thank you. It's our pleasure. Well, the first thing that we'd like to do is invite you both just to introduce yourselves and then tell us a little bit about why you're running for this seat. And we will start with, how about Maggie, because she's on top.
The new one. Well, my name is Maggie Koska. I'm running for City of St. Augustine Beach Commission because I'm concerned that our officials aren't listening to the voice of the people who have elected them. I'm worried about the effects and the impact that recent commission decisions have had on our community and the quality of life that we know it today, and on generations to come. I've been living in St. Augustine for 24 years. I've seen lots and lots of changes, some positive and some that were not so good, that I think that were made perhaps in haste. The 55-foot hotel down at the end of the street is a very contentious issue for beach residents. And plans for that hotel were being made at the same time that a citizen charter review committee was putting together a list of recommendations and concerns, one of which was height restrictions. The recommendations weren't considered, and city officials gave the builders an exemption without informing the committee, and the issue never even reached the commission. The new sign ordinance is another issue. It discriminates against the freedom of speech and with local businesses. It puts an extraordinary and unfair financial burden on the businesses that are local. And once again, this ordinance was made without asking for input from local businesses or citizens in the community, the very people that this ordinance affects. There's a lot of issues within our community that'll need to be addressed, such as parking, the pier, continued growth, fiscal responsibility. I think that my experience as a classroom teacher and as a small business owner gives me some unique quality skills that would serve the commission very well and serve our community very well. I look forward to restoring trust and civility in the commission, which I think has deteriorated over time, and looking forward to bringing respect, professionalism, and accountability back to the commission.
This may be the first time we need you to rebut an introduction. No.
Oh, and I'm happy to.
We'll get into all this.
I'm really very happy to.
I'm sure.
Okay.
You got the mic.
Thank you very much. My name is Andrea Samuels, and I am running for re-election at the City Commission of St. Augustine Beach, seat number 1. I've had the honor to serve the city as a commissioner, and I am also the city's first woman mayor. Throughout my tenure, I have been a strong advocate for neighborhood rights. Some examples of this advocacy include helping stop construction of a cell phone tower next to a residential neighborhood, voting against a third hotel on Beach Boulevard, and for my advocacy in 2015 received the Home Rule Hero Award from the Florida League of Cities. I strongly believe in managed growth and initiated an ordinance that puts the final decision of all major impact projects back to the City Commission. This will guarantee enforcement of a 30-foot building height restriction. I also initiated a full review of our land development regulations for updating and clarification. I have been and continue to be active in our community, serving and supporting many community groups. Through these community groups, I have been able to introduce events and activities that enhance the quality of life that we enjoy in St. Augustine Beach. These events showcase our restaurants and have had a positive effect on the businesses located on Beach Boulevard. An example of these events is the Music by the Sea concert series, Taste of the Beach, and to honor our veterans, the Veterans Day service. I am honored to be endorsed for re-election by Senator Travis Hudson, Sheriff David Shore, Veterans Council Chairman Bill Dudley, and former County Commissioner Mark Miner, and active Commissioner Gary Snodgrass. I am running to keep my advocacy for the neighborhoods. I want to improve parking and mobility. I want to maintain our low taxes and high quality of services. I'm an advocate for beach renourishment. I sit on many boards, one of them being the TDC. I also sit as a trustee on the investment board for the Florida League of Cities, as well as the insurance trust for the Florida League of Cities. I am a director of the Northeast League of Cities as well. I think these are all important aspects to bring our city forward and to be in the public eye, so that we know we have needs. Beach renourishment, a prime example of why advocacy is so important. Without beach renourishment, I believe that the city of St. Augustine Beach would have suffered the way Volano suffered and the way South Summer Haven suffered. So I hope you will consider re-electing me. And thank you.
Thanks. Let's start out with you. You spoke of a 55-foot hotel height limit, and you spoke for 35-foot hotel height limit.
Yes, sir.
Let's figure that one out.
Okay.
Either way.
Please, go ahead.
The plans for the 55-foot hotel or 53-foot, I'm not quite sure how that all spills out. I know that a community group was meeting at the same time that city officials are meeting with the developers of that property. I know that the citizens, I've talked to thousands of citizens within our community. It is a very, very contentious issue. I am shocked that the city didn't have something in place as it does now to maintain the 35-foot height restrictions. And if that were in place, then that 55-foot hotel, 53, whatever that it is, would not be occurring right now. The fact that it wasn't even brought before the commission is extraordinarily concerning to me. This means that decisions are being made about our city without the input of the citizens. I am happy that there is now a avenue for the height restriction to be enforced, but I'm not quite sure why it took so many tall buildings in order to finally get it there.
Okay. Well, first let me address that the approval was done by the P&Z board, which is a voluntary citizen group that we appoint. So citizens were involved, number one. In regard to it not coming before, the Planning and Zoning Board had been set up to have certain privileges. One of them is to oversee variances. To that point, there had never been a need to oversee, which why I was very surprised and extremely disappointed that this went forward. Having talked to several of the Planning and Zoning Board members and asking them what was their point in making this decision, they felt that they couldn't make any other decision because of the FEMA rules and the DEP. And I presented to them, and I'm still making this argument, and we're working on this in the LDRs, that parking alone would have been enough. Or if you're unsure, happy to have sent it to the commission. But the Planning and Zoning Board chose to make that decision. That's what they were appointed to do at the time. You know, everybody, it's always good to be, you know, crystal ball. I flunked crystal ball in college. I didn't get that. So we had an issue. I've resolved the issue by making sure that all major impact comes back to the commission. And it won't happen again. And I think that's what's important. And in regard to having several buildings that are tall, there's only one other that I'm aware of. That's the Holiday Isle. And that was built before the 35-foot height limit was put into our LDRs. Before my time. I came in 2000. I think that hotel was built in the 1990s. This was before my time. So we should no longer have any issue in regard to where do you measure? And that was the issue, wasn't it? It's not how high is the building, it's where do you measure from? That was the issue. And because of FEMA, and I think we all appreciate FEMA at this point in time, don't we?
Sure.
We all recognize the need for FEMA. Buildings have to be elevated. We have resolved that issue. And I challenge anybody, go down Beach Boulevard. Look to your left and look to your right. All the new development. The Hilton Garden Inn, it's elevated. It's elevated because of the FEMA requirements. However, in the LDRs, we have actively been discussing and talking about measuring from the 1 foot above the crown of the road. And that's where we are now.
I have a question for you if you don't mind.
Sure.
You said that the, was it the
Planning and zoning. Mm-hmm.
that was an appointed?
That's correct.
And what was the process of selection and who actually made that appointment?
Okay, well, the commission as a whole makes the appointment. We have people volunteering from the residents who put in an application to be appointed to these boards so that they can be active and incorporated into the community. I, for one, want citizen input. And what better way for a community to govern itself than to be actively involved?
I guess, were there any members of that board, did they present with experience?
Absolutely. In fact, the chairman is a land use attorney.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm sorry, because I'm confused by this, but at the time is it PZA? Is this what you,
Planning and Zoning Board,
Agency Board,
PZB, PZA.
Was it not like the other ones where they only make recommendations to the council and the council okays it? Or are there, I thought that was the way it was, but I might be mistaken.
And now you're not, because of the ordinance that I initiated. Prior to that, they had the final say.
Okay.
And no one on the city commission was aware that they were able to have the final say?
Yes, we were. And that had been something of a source of pride for them. Up until that point, there had been very little need to micromanage the community because people were aware. And again, we're looking at the confusion between what FEMA required and what the DEP required. FEMA required an elevation of 10 feet. The DEP, because of the velocity zones, we had it intersected on 2 different velocity zones. See if I can get this right. There was the VE and the VVE, I think. It's like a diamond, you know? Okay? And because just 1 inch of that property went into the second zone, there was a requirement from DEP to be elevated an extra 8 feet, 6 inches. So the decision was to allow them to elevate, and then from that elevation, the building itself is 35 feet, plus the allowed 10 feet for the cupola or the design or the architect or whatever. And people are adding from sea level the footage, and that's where you're getting all these numbers from. So to prevent this confusion and discord among the community, we asked for the input. And this is what we have decided. We've worked with the land developer planner that we had hired, doing our land development regulations. And we have, working with them with the tree board, the planning and zoning board, this is where we are now. We're now looking at measuring 1 foot above the crown of the road. And we will be voting on this. We're meeting on November 19th for the sign ordinance, by the way. And we will be having special meetings and going through the ordinances to update our LDRs to bring them forward into the 21st century, because we need to. And I think any city that doesn't go through their LDRs and update really needs some work.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just basically the difference is it measured at sea level or is it measured from the allowable buildable height? And then there's different allowable buildable heights depending on which agencies you're dealing with. So
okay, so I'm saying that the question was never the 35-foot height limit. The question was always, where do you start measuring living space from? Do you start measuring from 0? Do you start at 10? Do you start at 18? Where do you measure from? That was the issue.
I would respectfully disagree. Actually, this is an issue that came about because of reactive measures instead of proactive measures. The code that Ms. Samuels is speaking of, the FEMA code, is absolutely correct. However, that was initiated in 2000 after the devastating effect of Hurricane Andrew on South Miami and the Homestead area. They had to take a close look at building heights, building restrictions, coastlines, and in addition to the properties that consistently get demolished across the Carolina borders. This hotel was granted permission to be built last year in 2015. So we had, as a city of St. Augustine Beach, from the time that FEMA enacted these measures for protection of coastline and buildings on coastlines until 2015, when they could have looked at their building and use code and defined clearly what they wanted in our city. For example, there are other cities who have taken into consideration the FEMA requirements and said, okay, your building can be X amount of feet or this much with the FEMA extensions. Whichever is higher is what the code, whichever is the code. But they can set it at 35 feet, which mean, and leave it at 35 feet with whatever building structures that FEMA has built into it. That's their prerogative to be able to do that, but they didn't do that. That would have been proactive. That would have prevented 55-foot hotel from being built on the property that it's on. The sad thing is there was only a very small portion of that property that was in a flood zone that mandated the 10 feet that instituted the FEMA requirement, and now. Which is kind of strange after the hurricane. But just before the hurricane, that flood map was redone, and that is not even any longer in the floodplain. So if the building was looked at today, they wouldn't have gotten that extra footage to build the hotel to 55 feet. So there should have been a lot of things taken into consideration before the hotel plans were accepted all the way along the way. But again, we need to, as a city, take proactive measures, taking into consideration all avenues, all changing laws, and put them into effect in our city, that we can manage our city and our growth the way that we want it managed.
Okay. Let's leave the hotels, if that's okay with everybody for now.
Sure.
I understand from residents that an issue here might be that might come up as lack of civility on boards. Does anybody want to discuss that? You can start, because I think
Sure.
you alluded to it.
Sure. My campaign is built on restoring trust and civility. Leadership has to be based on trust and civility. Civility is simply the formal politeness and courtesy in behavior and in speech. And that's not always shown in our commission meetings. We should provide a welcoming environment for our citizens, since they're the ones that elected the officials, and the officials are supposed to be acting on their best interest. And trust. Trust is the firm belief in the truth, ability, reliability, or strength of someone or something. And it exudes from confidence in someone, belief in someone, faith in someone, that certainty, there's an issue of certainty. Things will happen because they say that they will happen, and assurance. We need those in our leadership. Those are absolute qualities that all leaders should exemplify.
Well, I'm not going to argue with Webster's dictionary. So, in regard to civility, it's true. We're people, and sometimes around 9:30, 10 o'clock, when you've been there for 5 hours and people have been less than civil to you, you can sort of become annoyed. I'm not going to say that doesn't happen. It makes us human. I think, however, in the long run, if you were to watch the commission meetings, that most of the civility comes from a small group of people that come to our meetings and are abusive, verbally abusive, because they are allowed to be. I don't know, how do you control that? They have the right to speak, and as elected officials, we are held to a different standard. I think you all know that. So we listen as quietly and patiently as we can, and like I said, after the fourth or fifth person comes up and accuses you of whatever crimes against God and country, I could see where somebody might get irritated, and I think everybody here can as well. People are listened to. They have every opportunity to get up. We even allow comment during presentations. So the right is there. And I'm wondering, you know, I don't see how you could control people when they're angry. You know, when I was the mayor, I would express that, you know, you have every right to be angry, but please be civil. And I think, you know, it goes both ways. It's not just from the dais. It has to come from the people as well. I just don't see how you would impose that on citizens who are coming to speak and from their heart and their passion, how you would control that.
I don't think that you can control what other people do, but you can control yourself. And it is a responsibility of people in leadership to control themselves. There should be no eye rolling, there should be no under the breath comments, there should be no interruption in somebody speaking where they're told that it's a waste of their time. It's totally wrong. It brings about a feeling that citizens aren't welcome at those meetings.
Well, I don't recall that comment ever being made. And again, like I said, we're human beings. And sometimes, you know, after 8 or 9, you know, you're there 4 or 5 hours. Again, you know, there's that standard. The people that I sit with on the dais, and I include myself in that group, are professional. They're courteous. They're polite. We do what we can to allow interactive approaches. We encourage free speech. We encourage the community to come and speak to us. We encourage the community to participate. Obviously, we have volunteer boards. We encourage workshops to get communication out there. I'm at a loss as to how the trust and the civility is gone. If people ask me to do something, I do the best that I can, and I'll tell them the truth if I can or can't do that. You know, we are trapped under the charter as well. We're not allowed to direct staff. We can only ask for information. And because of the sunshine laws, we're only allowed to meet under specific conditions. So for that time, we have to trust staff to be able to provide us with that information. There are times when I do go outside and I look for more information, if I can get it from other cities, which is why the Florida League of Cities is so great, because they are a great resource. But again, I'm just wondering, when you have people coming up and yelling at you and doing ad hominem attacks on your families, and attacks on your integrity, and attacks on your physicality, or whatever it is, I wonder how long it would take before you rolled your eyes.
Okay. Do you agree with that?
Maggie, you said you have a hope to have more citizen input in decision making and better communication and involvement with the county to help maintain the public areas or beach community. Going back to the citizen input, what does that look like in a practical sense, and why is that
Sure.
lacking?
I would like to find a way to encourage more citizen input and more opinions and ideas, because that's where we get the best ideas to move forward from, is the people who actually live and work in the community, who experience the conditions on an everyday basis. And I would welcome opportunities to be able to work with citizens through either workshops or town hall meetings, or encouraging more involvement in the commission meetings for more ideas. Because when you have a small group of people, you have a small pool of ideas. When you have a larger group of people, you have a larger supply of ideas.
Do you think that input is stifled now?
I do believe that it's stifled because of the reasons that I just listed. I don't think that a large part of our community really trusts the commission to act on their best interest. And I disagree with Ms. Samuels. I believe there is a lack of civility with the commissioner, the current commission.
Do you think the community is stifled in how they interact with the board?
No, I don't. What I think is that people are so involved in their lives that to become active is difficult for them. I believe in workshops. I had several, especially when the issue of the hotel came up, to learn, to bring knowledge. Had the insurance and the FEMA people, and bringing information is important. We do better with knowledge. I am a proponent. We had, for the charter committee, we chose people from the community. We have our boards, which are community citizens, the tree board, the beautification board, the planning and zoning board, code enforcement board. These are all community people that are appointed to these boards from the commission. I am easily accessible. I think every commissioner is. I try to respond as quickly as possible to my emails and my phones. 24 hours is my limit. I try to be as responsive as possible. I can't answer for any of the other commissioners because I don't know about them. I only know about me. That's who I know about. And I know that I am responsive to the citizens. I have no complaints in that. In fact, I get applauded for my response to the citizens, because I'm a firm believer that just because you get elected doesn't mean you become disconnected. And that means being actively involved in the community as well as the community being actively involved with you.
I hesitate to bring up building heights again.
Please.
Oh, please.
But it also goes back to community involvement. I cover the beach off and on, as you know, and I hadn't heard about building heights for quite some time. It seemed like there was a very vocal group of people who were opposed to that hotel being built, and there was a challenge, and they withdrew their challenge, and it's generally, my take on the ground is that it's generally been accepted that, okay, we lost that battle, but we're going to win the war. There's going to be an established measuring point. We're going to live with the 55. So do you sense a community pushback on this hotel still?
Well, I've been walking the neighborhood, ironically, and thank you for asking that question. I've been walking the neighborhood, and I've had maybe 2 or 3 people talk about it. They're thrilled about the ordinance that I initiated that gives the commission the final approval for all major developments, because we have to answer to the elected officials. We as elected officials have to answer to the community. Where a volunteer board is a volunteer board, and they work very, very hard. I mean, these people have been great. And again, they're working on information provided to them by staff, not the commission, by staff. And with the city's attorney, there's a lawyer there helping them go through it. Okay, I mean, there is an appeal process, is what you're talking about, and the gentleman who brought it forward, we never got a chance to enter into any discussion, because all he did was bring it forward, make a comment, and then he withdrew it. So as soon as he withdrew it, we were stopped from discussing it, and our hands were then legally tied. So again, I keep going back to this issue. The 35-foot height limit was never the issue. The issue was, where do you start measuring from? And we've resolved that issue. That is no longer...
That hasn't been voted on, though. That's coming up.
It's coming, and there's no way that it's not going to... I can't imagine, after the amount of time that was put into developing it, that we're going to not go forward with it. I can't imagine that. We even discussed how much fill you can bring in. I mean, we really are being proactive. We really are. I can honestly say also, by the way, that all of the other buildings that had been built prior to the hotel, when they were put in, they are 35 feet. They are 35 feet. The only consideration that made this different for this one piece of property was, in fact, the velocity zones. That's what made it different. And again, I'm thinking about the hurricane today. Look where people are. I'm so pleased that we got the IA. We got the individual assistance. People's homes have been destroyed. As a coastal community, we need to adhere to FEMA. We have got to. We need to protect people's homes, and that's important too. It really is.
Before we move on from that topic, Jerry, thanks for bringing this up again.
Yeah.
Did you want to say anything else about the?
Sure. I think that it's the general consensus in the community that they're going to have to live with us. But it is a contentious issue, and people are not happy about it. They're not happy because they don't feel as though their voice was heard in keeping the restrictions that they would have liked to have seen.
I'm not getting the sense that the two issues we've got spoken about are telling me where each of you want to go. I'm going to start off with just a basis that's, let's say that Beach is a flip-flop Mayberry. I mean, not Okie, but I mean it's dynamic, it's rich, it's jivey, it's hip, it's got no ghettos, it's got no real problems. It's a sweet place to be. So you're not digging yourself out of some of the problems that they have downtown or some of the problems with, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you're starting from a great place. In 5 years, what are the 3 major things you'd like to see that you would want to change with it, and new things, future things, and where do you see it going? So why don't you start?
Me again first.
Okay.
Okay, sure. I think that we need a better mobility system, either through transportation or bike paths or something, to be able to move people around the beach side in an easier fashion. We are, with being listed in the top 10 of everything, we get a very large influx of people. And that's a great thing. Tourism is our #1 economic mover in this area. But when does too much get to be too much? When does enough get to be enough? And so I would like to see a better transportation situation on the island. More bike paths, more accessibility for walking and biking and that kind of thing. We have a major parking problem on the beach. There is not enough parking for the people who want to come to the beach, for the residents who want to go from one end of town to the beach. It's a major issue. Did I answer your question?
Parking and mobility.
Parking and mobility, yes.
I know mobility. Well, I mean, you say we have a problem parking. What can you do with it? Where's the room? What do you do with mobility? I mean, the bus system. I think that was
me. Yes.
You're trying something with another bus, and it didn't work.
Well, it didn't work because the commission didn't want to initiate the funding for it.
And they are expensive. I was just saying, I know it's good to say we need mobility, we need more parking, but do you have any idea of how to get there?
I think that we could actually find some funds in the fiscal, in the budget. I also think that it should eventually become a self-sufficient enterprise. Initially, there's large outlay for the vehicles and what have you, but ideally, long-term, it should begin to pay for itself. Yeah, where do you put the parking? I know there's a few vacant properties along the island that could be used for parking. Again, it goes back to some decisions that were, I think, not thought out. For example, the parking at the pier is used for additional parking for Panama Hatties as well as Salt Life. Those are 2 restaurants that are using public parking, counting those parking spaces to be able to have their establishment be open. Because for a restaurant, in order to have an X number of tables, you need X number of parking spaces. There's a whole formula with that. If you're having 2 restaurants already counting public parking for their restaurant, then how much of that is actually being left for public parking? We can't keep on allowing special privileges for businesses up and down the beach without getting something back for the city. If the city is giving up parking spaces, then what does the city get in return?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just busy writing. I apologize.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you about my plan.
Yeah,
Can I tell you about my plan? Because I'm very excited about it. Okay, in regard to paying for it, I don't think it should be on the residents' backs at all. And I think I'm ready, and I have been advocating this for years.
What?
I'm sorry, paying for mobility and parking. I think we need to look at the TDC. There are bed tax dollars that are coming in. In fact, there is even an increase in bed tax dollars. They have a prediction of 10 million this year. This is great. So I have been an advocate right along of opening up the legislation, working with Senator Hudson, as you all know, and looking to create an addendum, caveat, whatever you want to call it, that's already been initiated by one senator, I think Senator Bradley, if I'm not mistaken, where you can pay for mobility. And the statute, the 125 statute of bed tax, says that mobility can be paid for with TDC money if it's attached to an event. So I'm going to take it one step further. Even if we don't get legislation to change the amendment, and I have been advocating for that, by the way, what we could do and I've gone through this, is if we could get a calendar and do all those events and have a yearly calendar, we could start utilizing. I bet you would see that we have spans of time. Nights of Lights is a perfect example. How many months does that go on for? Am I correct? 3, 4 months? That's 4 months of TDC monies paying for mobility. Well, we could start a tram service, something I had talked about, creating a fictitious route bus service that would drive the people from the city of St. Augustine Beach to the city of St. Augustine with specific stops. Stops at landmarks like the Lighthouse and the Alligator Farm and the amphitheater. And it doesn't even have to be a full time. It can be Wednesday through Saturday night. And that covers events. At the amphitheater, they're having trouble parking. It's not just the city of St. Augustine Beach that's having an issue. It is the county. It is the state that's having a parking issue, actually. It's the state. So we need to look at alternative sources rather than penalizing the residents and looking for them to pay for it when they don't have to. Or perhaps if it's determined that they do have to, they subsidize monies from the TDC. And then it does not become a financial burden on the taxpayer. And I think we can do it. I know we can do it.
Pay for what, though? I'm not hearing a plan.
Busing.
You have the cars, but where do you put the car for parking? I mean,
Okay,
does the beach need a parking garage? Does the beach want a parking garage?
I personally am more than content to build a parking garage, let's say over by Mizell Road, and have a tram service available. We've all been to Disney. It works for them. And drive those people. Now people say, well, nobody wants to with their kids and their and their coolers, and that comes from having a constant system that you can depend on. And after a while, they'll get used to it. Parking, the county needs to take a look at where their land is. When I spoke about this with Mayor Shaver about the parking and tram service, she said it's a walking city. We want to have a walking city. That's great, but you also have to be ADA compliant. So you have to provide it anyway. If you're going to have satellite parking, you have got to have that, because you just cannot have that expectation. So I would like to see a real effort made with tourist development dollars to develop a plan. I know the county has initiated another parking study, and they're working to develop pay for parking. Okay, that if we were to look at what is available, let's look at it legislatively. Let's sit down with Senator Hudson and Representative Stevenson and Representative Renner. Let's see what we can do to fix this problem where it's a minimal or no fee to the residents. We need at least to look at it.
Okay. So beyond mobility, 2 things that you'd be looking to change in the next 5 years, or that was sort of the original question. What are the 3 things you'd really like to see different?
Okay, well, I have been trying now to manage events so that we have policies in place in regard to events, so that we don't wind up with the problem that I had seen in the city of St. Augustine, where you have event after event after event, and you start tiring out your citizens, you start tiring out your services, We need to have a calendar of events. We need to schedule it. We need to hear what the residents want to have in that policy. And, you know, and a perfect example of an event gone wrong in the city, the Diva Run. Perfect example. I brought it forward. It was a trial to see if we could handle it, if it was something that we wanted. We've done it for 3 years. They've outgrown us. We cannot handle an event of more than 2,500 people. That's been made pretty clear to me. I tried working with the county to prevent large events on big holidays at the beach. I understand that that's a draw. Well, you know, we have 19 police officers. You know, there's only so much that your services can do. So we need to work with the county and with the residents of the city of St. Augustine Beach to develop an active plan to sit there and say, okay, look, the 5K runs, we're only going to allow 2 a month, and here are the dates that you're allowed to do that. I think that's an important part of making sure that we maintain our quality of life, because the residents have to stay there. And I'm pro running in the events. Understand that I am very pro that. A lot of these are done by nonprofits that benefit the community. And that, again, for me is a criteria. Does it benefit the community? The Diva Run understands that, you know, that the fact that it's a for-profit, you know, that's not working. Closing Pope Road is not working. They all seem to have the same route. So we need to work on what is an acceptable route so that people aren't prevented from going to church or feel trapped in their homes or whatever it is. We need to look. We need to start bringing these big major events outside the cities over to the St. Johns County Fairgrounds, as an example. Elkton, Hastings, aren't they developing a trail system? Yes, they are. These are the places, and wouldn't Hastings love to have that kind of a tourist economy brought to them? Wouldn't it benefit these people? And that's what we need to look at.
Okay.
Sorry.
Maggie, can you give us an idea for a solution to the parking problem? Does the beach need a garage? We'll ask you the same question.
I don't think that the residents would be on board with a parking garage. I think it just goes against what they believe is protecting the integrity and beautification, beautiful scenery and preserving the integrity of our beach. We have a problem. I would like the city to stop allowing businesses to count the public parking spaces as business parking spaces. That would free up a lot of spaces for just public parking. The pier is always full. I know that there's a lot of people talking about, well, we should institute a parking meters at the beach pier. What do you do for citizens who are living in that area? Do you give them a sticker to disqualify them from having to pay the toll, like going on the beach? You get a sticker for being allowed to drive on the beach. You get to buy a seasonal sticker, so that would cover your parking expenses for a season. I'm not sure what the solution is. I know that we're looking at options. We added parking along 16th Street. We added parking along the side of a couple of different streets. We need to work with the residents in finding a workable solution to not infringe on the properties of the people who live right at the beach. And I think it's a doable, workable situation. There are vacant properties that one of them is right next to a city parking area. That why doesn't the city take a look at purchasing additional properties to expand parking? I think that working with citizens and working with residents, working with local businesses will help to find a solution.
Maggie, how many parking spaces would be freed up if the restaurants gave back what the city that's in there.
I don't know if that's a logistical possibility because they are open because they are counting those spaces. For example, Salt Life and Panama Hatties. So there's no undoing that once it's already been done. But I don't know the quantity.
Well, in regard to the restaurants parking there, and it had always been an issue with Panama's, if you see it, report it so that we can go to the managers and say you need to move your cars. You know, we've asked them repeatedly not to do it. Please tell your people not to do that. Salt Life has a cart that comes around and picks people up, trying to work with that. They have valet parking. You know, in regard to this, the county wanting to pay for parking, well, personally, I don't support it. And here's the reason why. I understand the county has to make money, but you know, it's the pier parking is not. It's not just a parking lot. It's our park. And if they're going to start looking at specific areas, parks for paid parking, and I said that at the CDC meeting, I really hope they're looking at all their parks and not just the beachfront parks, because it is a park. It is an environment for us to do our events at the beach. We have other things going there, and we would lose that availability to have events if they were to have parking there. No more art shows. No more farmers market. I think we need to really take a look at that, which is why I had said to the county how disappointed I was that we were not included in that conversation. So there is no easy solution. I think there are many pieces to that puzzle in regard to parking and mobility. I presented one piece. Mayor Shaver has presented another. John Regan has presented one. We need to sit down and we need to figure out how we're going to do this. Let's take a look at other samples of what other cities have done, what has worked and what hasn't worked, rather than just doing that. You're counting parking spaces. I don't want my city and my residential neighborhoods to turn into parking lots. You know, I just don't want that to happen. I don't want to start building more parking spaces on residential roads. Why would anybody want that? And yes, they are parking on the grass. They are doing that. And that's why we have police. And they're doing the best they can with what they have. And during the summer, our busy season, we are crowded and we are in trouble. There's no doubt about it, because we're such a great place to come to. So what do? Well, you manage the growth. You manage it. And you manage it by educating people and teaching people that here's a spot that you can park at, and the tram will come and take you. And the tram is finished not at 4 o'clock, but maybe at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. And again, the subsidization and the paying, again, we need to look at it from TDC. The beach is a tourist destination, and the beach is open from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And then what happens after September? That's why I say I keep going back to this calendar of events, how important this calendar of events is.
There's a lot of entities eyeing that TDC money.
Yeah.
We've heard county candidates come in. We've heard candidates from the city of St. Augustine come in and say there's a need for us to have more of those TDC dollars. And now you're saying that could possibly fund this trolley system or transportation system. How confident are you that, one, that this rule can be changed that would free up that money, and two, that there would be anything left for the city of St. Augustine Beach?
Because it already has been changed. That's why I'm confident that it would be changed. Now, whether or not the monies would be just specifically for mobility, which I think is the need, mobility and parking facilities I think are the need right now. I really think that, in my personal opinion, is that people started looking at the TDC funding because I started ringing that bell. I was the one that brought it up. Let's look at the statute. So now everybody's looking at the statute. They have the organization, I'm trying to think of the county that opened up for policing, to pay for policing during events, at 10%. Part of the requirements are that you have to have 225,000 people or less, I believe. You need to have $10 million in TVC funding, and you need to be a coastal city to qualify for that. Well, if we, in fact, we do get to $10 million, then we would qualify to be able to pay for the extra policing that we need through TDC dollars. So that, it has already been done. The change has already been made. And I think that with careful allocation, again, like I said, it's subsidizing. I know that, you know, that Mayor Shaver would love to have the TDC pay the $250,000 that they need to tent the Lightner Museum. And it was brought up at the TDC meeting, and it was a very good question. And when the question that was asked was, why wasn't this budgeted for the city? Did you not know it was coming? So we have issues, we do. And I'm hoping that this is not just pie in the sky. And I would do everything I could to work toward getting dollars that are not dependent or less dependent on the residents, because I don't see why the residents should have to be punished to have a tourist industry.
Let's try something new.
Okay.
Mosquito control property.
Okay.
The city voted, I guess, to try to purchase property.
Yes.
For, was it $50,000?
That's what we're presenting.
Did y'all look at any sort of partnership with the county? I mean, Ron Parker Park is next door to the city.
Yeah.
Abuts it. Anastasia State Park.
Yeah.
Abuts it.
Yes.
I mean, it's like a hub of everything. It's just,
Yeah.
So, but you went in on your own to purchase it.
Well, 3 years ago, Jim, I don't know if you're aware, I went to the mosquito control and asked them to annex the property. I was sort of hoping to get it for free, and they turned me down.
They can't annex the property.
What?
I don't think they can annex the property.
Well,
The city.
because once they were done and moved it out, with that, unbeknownst to us, so we did not know about the
The
reverter
reverter
clause.
clause, yeah.
So we were done. We were done with that, exactly. My initial suggestion had been, and I had said that at the commission meeting, had been that let's let the county take it over, let them move all the beach services in there, because all the garages, everything is set up, it'd be perfect for them, and then let's take Ron Parker Park and let's extend it, and that way it doesn't cost anybody anything other than to renovate our park, which everybody wants to do anyway. Well, the understanding from the county is they can't afford to do anything, and they just have no interest in it. So in order to secure that, to make sure that we would be competitive and have a first crack at that, to be able to facilitate that area, we offered the $50,000 as a minimal. We have the money to pay for that. Our goal is to preserve land. That's one of our major goals in the city, and one of my major goals is to preserve land. So we don't know, of course, we don't know how much it would cost to clean it up. I hesitate to bring any child there until I know that the soil is clear. I hesitate to bring anybody actually there until I know that the soil is clear.
Do you have any issues with buying that property?
No, I have absolutely no issues of buying the
Y'all
property.
agree?
I do agree. I think that it should stay within the city of St. Augustine Beach.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You guys have anything?
Gentlemen?
Sure.
We normally, what we ask is because there's probably, we're certain a question that we didn't ask you. Is there anything that, or if you don't have that particularly, if you just want to sort of wrap something up, we can do that. But if there's a question that something that you two want to discuss, we have a few minutes to do that. Or we can just,
I'll leave it to my opponent here. She must have something she must want to discuss.
I would just like to ask for clarification on a few things that you said, actually. You suggested that you didn't want to create any systems that are a burden on the taxpayer. However, I do have to talk about a piece of property that the Civic Association is renting from the city of St. Augustine Beach for $1 a year. That is putting a burden on the taxpayer. If that property were rented at, say, $500 a month, which is probably about ballpark for that facility, That lease, the $1 a year lease, has been ongoing for the last 10 years. If the city would have leased it for $500 to the Civic Association or to another organization, that would have been $6,000 a year added into the budget for St. Augustine Beach, which over 10 years, it's not very difficult math is $60,000. So that, to me, is a burden on the taxpayers. The calendar of events, you said that we need to be careful about adding too many events, such as the Diva Run, large events, and that you want an active plan to limit events. But the Wednesday Music by the Sea event is growing by leaps and bounds every single week and puts a tremendous burden on the beach in parking and people every single Wednesday. So that's kind of contradictory. The TDC funds, there is a strict guideline on how those funds can be used. And this year, actually, the 2016 budget, the TDC budget, is about $8.4 million. Those funds, again, there's strict guidelines on how and where and when those funds can be used. I'm not sure that the plans that you had suggested would be criteria for TDC funds, but they may not. They may. I would have to do some more research on that. One of the things that I think that is terribly gone wrong in the beach is inconsistent code enforcement, whether it's building height, trees, setbacks, sign ordinance, which is right now unenforceable. And it needs to stop. There needs to be clarification on what the rules are, and the rules need to be followed by everyone, not just a few people. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had people that came to the commission to request trees be cut down that were denied, and rightfully so. I'm very pleased with the decision that the commission made and backed up the planning and zoning ruling. And yet, just a couple of weeks later, or a couple of days later, trees were being cut down in the right across the street that were greater than 30 inches in diameter that were not even given any consideration for, which is against the tree ordinance. So consistency is, again, it's part of leadership, civility, responsibility, trust. You have to have consistency. And I just see that there are so many inconsistencies that are happening in our community.
Okay. All right. Well, it's always a political season. The Civic Association is always brought forward. In regard to the $1 a year, we also have another building that's being rented by the Cultural Council for $1 a year for 25 years. And they collect rent, and they take the rent out of the city of St. Augustine Beach. Civic Association uses the building for storage. We share the storage, they share the storage with the Sons of Italy for the bocce courts and with the City of St. Augustine Beach as well. And they use it to bring community events. Music by the Sea is growing. So I'm amazed and I'm honored and humbled by how well it's been received. Thank you for pointing that out. So,
well, I didn't exactly say that.
Well, it is advantageous for the restaurant. That, you know, there's a weekly restaurant that comes and does a signature meal for $10 and under. So they get their name out. People try their wares, and it was originally developed as an economic boost. We have musicians that come and play. They're hired. They are paid a nice sum of money for 2 hours, and they get jobs from that. Police are hired to monitor the group, so that public safety.
Who pays for the police at those events? Just curious.
The Civic Association. So, and that's at I think it's now $36 an hour, but I'd have to double check the chief with that. It used to be 33. I don't know. So it's an economic driver. And, you know, personally I'm thrilled that the community is enjoying it and looks forward to it and asks. I've had people call me who are coming down and want to know who's playing when so they can plan their vacation. Can you imagine that? Around the group. They have their favorite groups. And I think that this is very important.
How do you determine that it's an economic advantage?
How do you determine that? By the success that the businesses have, the restaurants and the musicians. That's how I determine it. When the businesses are selling 200, the restaurants are selling over 200 meals at $10
The restaurant
for whatever.
at the pier that night.
That's correct. And the Civic Association, by the way, doesn't take any of the money that the restaurant makes, by the way. So it is an economic driver for them. Let's talk about the TDC. Yes, the funds are regulated, and I said that it would take an act of legislation to change those regulations. Inconsistent code enforcement. You know, the tree issue was unfortunate when it was brought to my attention. I worked with the family involved. The tree was determined by an arborist to have suffered damage, and we have in our code that if the tree is damaged, it will come down. Wasn't required to go before planning and zoning. There was an inconsistency in our codes. It's absolutely true, and that's how we found it out. That it also says that any tree over 30 inches has to go before planning and zoning. It's sort of, okay? So now we have a ruling from the attorney that says any tree, regardless of its condition, and that will be a change in those LDRs. The sign ordinance. Okay, that was done to us. We didn't do it. The Supreme Court, federal Supreme Court did that to us. And that it was a ruling that was determined that no speech can be any more important than any other speech. And our sign ordinance is pretty basic. It says no signs on city property. You can't put anything in the ground. You can walk around with it in City Hall if you want. You can say whatever you want. You can stand there with it. Put it on your car. You just can't put it in the ground. Now I know that there are some businesses that will have to comply with the change in regard to the sign ordinance because their signs are on city property. And we've addressed that with a leasing so they can lease that property. All they have to do is insure it. In fact, one restaurateur was more than happy to comply. He was upset about it first, but then he found out that his insurance would only be $350 a year. So we went ahead. After talking with that restaurateur, we went ahead with it. He was content to go ahead and sign it. Talked with him myself to make sure. The tree ordinance, yes, we did uphold it. It was through me when I presented the argument that we're not going to cut those trees down to build that house because there would be no loss of economic use if we didn't cut those trees down. And that's why we have the ordinance.
Okay, I suppose we're going to have to wrap up, but appreciate you both coming in.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was fun.
It was a healthy discussion.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much.